This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast, show number 255, the July 28th, 2017 edition. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker right now, but won't be for long, getting ready to head back up to upstate New York, to Saratoga Springs, to enjoy another fine weekend of horse racing. Joined here on the show today, as always, he's the People's Champion. He's getting ready to head back out to Del Mar. He's going to try to make some noise in this contest that's provided him a little bit of stress over the years. He, of course, is Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
Oh, nothing much. Just living that Austin traffic life. So if anyone honks at me, it's because I'm aggressively trying to get to my PP so we can try to pick some winners this weekend.
Hopefully by the time we get to going over the races this weekend, you'll be ensconced in your war room. We'll start the show with some general racing chatter, and a lot of that we have a guest back by popular demand. You asked for him, you got him. He's one of the most respected horse players in America, one of the most respected contest players in America. He's also a birthday boy. Welcome to the podcast, Duke Matties. What's going on, my friend?
Oh, just a lovely day here in Saratoga Springs. Going to try not to drink too much today on my 45th birthday, but I know that's not going to happen.
I didn't realize you and I have been in the world for like the exact same time. I faced number 45 coming up the day before the Whitney. So
oh my gosh, we are almost the exact same.
We'll have to share a
cool.
beverage. We'll celebrate. We'll celebrate that when any excuse once you get up there. What are your plans for the day? Will you be back in? What do you have a name for the area where you guys sit? Is there any nickname for it? I'll call it Matisseville, or the near the tree that almost got struck by lightning, or did get struck by lightning. But what do you guys call it?
We don't really call it anything but the backyard. But I mean, if we try to get people to meet us back there, we always say we're back by the Big Red Spring.
Sure.
The water that you never want to taste back there. It's pretty bad.
You won't be having a healthy dram of that reddish tinted sulfur water to celebrate your 45th?
Well, we use that as punishment when we lose as many races as we lost this meet. You have to go as punishment. You got to go take a shot of that water. So,
that'll get you back.
We do that every now and then.
Your winning ways will be surely following for fear of having to repeat that. JK, have you ever sampled from the Big Red Spring, or do we have to make that happen this week?
Oh no! Unless they got Tito's in it, there's no shot.
We can make that happen too.
So let's talk about what's been going on so far at this meet. First, we'll start with a story that I just sent in to the editors at DRF. Should be going up on drf.com shortly. A mutual friend of ours, Duke, had a little bit of a rough beat on Sunday night. I'm talking about the Breeders' Cup betting champion, Joe Applebaum.
Oh, yeah, Joe.
Oh, were you following that in real time?
I watched that in actual time. That was one of the sickest beats I've ever seen in my entire life. We're talking about the last race. What was that, on Sunday as it was?
Yeah, Sunday.
Sunday, he was alive to 5 horses in the pick 6, and he did not have the 12, and he got up in the last jump to beat him. He had that 8 horse who got through on the rail and looked like he was home free. I had to go over and tell him that was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. That was horrible.
He was looking at 577,000 had it come back the right way. I'm pretty sure that the pick 5 consolations were no consolation at all. You've been in spots like that, Duke, where you've had potentially life-changing scores get thwarted on you. As a horse player, how do you deal with that level of disappointment?
It's difficult. Like I told, Joe took it pretty well, actually. I mean, he actually was somewhat laughing after the beat. I think he was in shock that he lost, but he took it pretty well. I usually don't take it that well that quickly. Usually I'm pretty upset for a little period of time. But, in this game, you're going to have lots and lots of bad beats and lots of bad rides, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes, but you got to You got to. We have like the 5-minute rule. You got 5 minutes to complain about it, and after that, there's no more complaining. You got to get back in and start betting.
Your brother famously has a hole in the wall of his office that he punched there. I assume that was due to a beat of that nature.
I'm not sure which one that particular one was, but he of all people has had beats that are because the way he's not afraid to play insane amounts of money on long shots. So I mean he's one of a kind with those. So he's going to get them. But when he wins, boy, he really wins.
Well, that's right. And I
he's
think
like, Paul's one of those guys that's not afraid to key 50 to 1 shots, and and sometimes not reverse them.
That does seem like at least a little bit of madness. But I guess the theory is when you're going to be right, let yourself be right and enjoy the fruits of your intelligent thought, right?
Yeah, he was telling a story I think it was last night. He was telling a story how he bet an exacta one way when he was in Vegas. This was about 20 years ago. He bet it for, I think it was $2,000. He bet it one way, and it came the other way, and it paid like $200. And he didn't have it for a penny.
Is that in your wagering personality? That. I mean, how are you different? What are you inclined to do in that situation?
I just can't. I can't not reverse it. I mean, just if it's going to pay that much. But he's just. I have to have something on the other side. I mean, not to make a score, but get my money back. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big difference. Is there's some people who don't need that. For me personally, it would be just too frustrating, and I think it would be hard to turn the page and go on with my life without. It's still a beat. You're still not going to feel great about it, but at least to have something back in your pocket and know you didn't lose on this wager where your opinion was correct.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't be that close to right and and at least do okay in the race. But I think he only does that once in a while. I think that's just I don't think he does that all the time, but he does try to make scores, that's for sure.
Let's talk about some of the racing we saw last weekend, some pretty cool stories and performances. But one thing that I think people are still talking about this week is the decision to not DQ in Lady Eli's race on Saturday, and then Abel Tasman right back on Sunday. So we had the two of the signature races early in the meet, the Alabama and the CCA Oaks, with these interesting inquiries. What did you think of the decisions that were made, and how would you have liked to have seen it adjudicated?
The Lady Eli race, the horse in between had no choice, but Lady Eli was just sort of leaning on that. I can't remember who that horse was in between. It was a 4, wasn't it? Anyway,
Cadera, the motion horse.
Yeah. So Lady Eli was leaning on that horse, and that caused that horse to crowd the other horse. I don't think Castellano's horse was ever gonna go by those horses anyway. But he was up in the hole. The hole was open, and then it closed on him. So somebody should be at fault. But I don't think the one in the middle could be at fault because Lady Eli was leaning on it. So if they were going to do anything, they had to take down Lady Eli. And that probably wasn't going to happen in a race of that magnitude with Chad Brown winning it. I just don't think. I think politics played a little on that one.
Taking the politics out of the equation, though, you would have been okay in theory with taking Lady Eli down for tightening up on Cadera, who in turn I thought maybe cost Antino second. I think I said definitively on the show.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good analogy of analysis of that thing. I think it could have cost that horse second. I bet that horse that got tightened up on. I thought that horse was going to win, but I don't know. That's a judgment call because it's so hard to tell if he had any horse or he didn't have any horse. He just took up late in the race, and I don't know. I think I would have left it.
That was my inclination as well. What about in the CCA Oaks on Sunday? What did you think? Was that race riding from Mike Smith, as he said, channeling his inner Cordero, or was that a situation where that was a foul that prevented Elate from a fair chance to win the race?
No, I thought it was just good race riding. I mean, I watched Cordero do 100 times worse things than that, and they never used to take him down. So I mean, I thought it was good race riding. You think he just put the horse in a little bit of a tight spot. He didn't really try to, he didn't put her in that bad of a spot. I think that was just good race riding. I never thought Elate was ever going by that horse anyway.
I feel like he also left enough of a possibility that if Elate was much the best, that she could have kind of bowled through there. I thought
exactly. I think they did. I think that was totally the right call.
Now, it's been a little tricky with the weather we've had so far, but have you noticed any trends through the first days of this Saratoga meet in terms of track bias that you've been paying attention to one way or the other?
The dirts played, I think, for the most part, fair. I think there was the second day, I think Inside Speed did really good early in the card, I think it was. That track might have changed at some point during that day, but for the first 5 or 6 races, I thought Inside and Speed was good. For the most part, though, we've had a lot of wet tracks, and I think the track's been somewhat fair. I think horses have come from last, and horses have rallied wide, and I don't see anything on the dirt. On the turf, though, I think the inner turf is really playing towards Inside. I think the Inside has really been, Inside Speed's been dominant on those inner turf races, and the exact opposite in those 5.5 turf races on the Widener. It's been all outside. I mean, almost every day you see a 10, 11, winning from 10 posts, 11 posts. You never used to see that. So I think the outside of the outer turf has been definitely the place to be.
Looks like something to keep an eye on for sure. When a track changes in the middle of the day, and in fact that did happen on Saturday, I think after maybe the first 3 dirt races, right around the point in the card you're saying, it would have been 5 or 6 races in, they did, I think, harrow and water. Do you make notes of that when you see them manipulating the track during the running of the races, or when you're doing your bias work, is it something you're sort of getting a sense of as you watch the races and then you go back and look at afterwards?
It's really tricky with New York. New York is one of the few places that I think where their track superintendent messes with the track, it seems like constantly. So the variants really change in New York from race to race, which doesn't really happen at many places. He obviously somebody gets in his ear, wants the track faster, wants more water on it, or maybe he does it on his own. I don't know. But what I like to do is I like to pick up on bias early in the day and and run with it and try to make scores off that. But it's so hard in New York because, like you said, you were pretty sure, and I'm pretty sure that the track changed sometime during that day because Inside Speed was winning everything, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. I mean, that makes it tough on a bettor. I mean, it makes it really tough on a bettor because now what if you've bet a late pick 4 based on thinking the track's inside and it's not? You've pretty much just thrown your money in the garbage can. I mean, because you're not going to hit a pick 4 when you're playing a bias angle. And then it's not there. You're just going to be completely wrong, and you look like a fool. But I wish the guy would just leave the track as is for a day. You know what I mean? I don't care if he changes it from day to day, but I think you got to be consistent with what you do with the harrowing or the sealing. You got to do it the same every race, and that's fair for the bettors. I mean, when you start messing with it and changing things, I get really upset, as you've seen on my Twitter account. I call them out on it, and everybody thinks I'm crazy. It's like, but if you do speed figures, you're not crazy because the variant will go from -20 to +5. It can't happen. You know what I mean? It can't happen without somebody doing something to the track. The track doesn't change that drastically it just from drying out. It just doesn't happen.
JK, I know you have a couple questions for Duke, and then we have a couple questions for all of us from listeners I want to get to, and then we'll round out the second half of the show today by talking about some racing from Monmouth and Del Mar, and of course, Saratoga this weekend. But why don't you jump in with a question or two for Duke?
Yeah, no, I just, I've always been amazed on how many tracks Duke can juggle at once, and I think that it's something, we always talk about, the handicapping ins and outs, but I think an interesting thing I've always wanted to hear Duke talk about, and I don't even know if we've ever talked about it, is kind of like what your workflow is, Duke, like on a normal Saturday during Saratoga. I mean, what time are you up? Are you looking at Saratoga first? Do you even crack Del Mar? Or do you wait until after the day is over, then you start diving into Del Mar? Like, what's your workflow in terms of kind of tackling everything? Because I know you'll bet Delaware on a Saturday at Saratoga from the backyard. So I just wanted to know if you could share with everybody kind of how you go about doing that.
Yeah, it's tougher at Saratoga to, keep all my tracks going. So this year I've decided to just go with anything I have a bet back list so that if any horse pops up at any of those other tracks, obviously I'm gonna wager and try to design some horizontal bets and do that. But in the morning, usually about 9 o'clock, I'm at the computer looking at what tracks that I want to concentrate on that day. And Gulfstream has been a track that I've been following all year, and it's hard to give it up at this point. So I'm doing Saratoga first. Gulfstream is my second track for the morning, and then Del Mar is obviously my third. But I don't usually get to Del Mar, like you said. I don't get to Del Mar until I'm at Saratoga. I usually pick about a time when I'm not liking the race at Saratoga to go through the Del Mar card. And usually I can get through, at least the early pick 5 at Del Mar in about a half an hour. I can at least get that done. And, it's I put a lot of time and a lot of work in. And look, for me, my work is done prior. My work is done prior to the day. So everything's on the sheet in front of me. So it's not as hard for me to stick with 3 or 4 tracks. I think for most people that's tougher because they don't have the access to what, PPs and information I have. I think that's the problem for the everyday person to follow more tracks than one. And for me, it's a little easier. Plus, I've been doing it for so long that it's just like old hat to me. Doing 3 tracks.
Right. I think to some people
that.
Yeah, exactly. I think to some people that might be shocking that you can handicap the pick 5 in 30 minutes. But the thing is that, like Duke said, when some of us are looking at stuff Friday through Sunday, Duke and these guys are doing work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, to be ready. Their trip notes are already in. They don't have to watch replays. They don't have to look up their trainer stats. They're right there in front of them. They don't have to look up to find out if the race was key. It's right there in front of them. So, it's really not shocking that you can get it done in that quick amount of time.
And to put in a quick plug, while you guys have a proprietary database that obviously the world doesn't have access, a program like Formulator does at least allow the trip handicappers among us a chance to trip races even in real time and then have those notes come up when those horses run back. So we could sort of head fake towards what you guys do. But this program you've developed over the years, Duke, this must be an incredible database of info. Where did the idea for doing that come from?
My brother Paul came up with the idea about, we used to carry around, we would carry around like, it would be almost like a suitcase full of papers. I mean, like, everything was on paper, and, we every time we go to the track, we'd have these big backpacks full of papers, and we'd have to, write down all our trips on the form, and you take out the form, and then you start going through every race. And then, it just took hours and hours and hours. And then Paul came up with the idea to put it all into the computer about, I think we started in about the year 2000, I think it was.
That's amazing.
And him and my dad put the thing together, and, we just started getting more and more people involved in it. It started with just me Paul and me just doing all the trips and him doing all the figures. And, he had already been working for Bayer and doing speed figures for he did every track, I think, back then. I think it was 68 tracks he would do speed figures for, and Bayer and Hopkins would do 2 each. So he was the load. He did all the work, and they just, they were the names. So him having that experience of doing that much work, at that age, I think he was only in his low 20s, and he doesn't sleep much. So I mean, those combinations of all that, he can do so much work. It's ridiculous.
That is crazy.
And the database was just such a huge thing for us. I mean, turned the world around.
We had a question come in, and this is a good one for you, Duke, about multi-race wagering, specifically asking if we use the Stephen Christ ABC X sort of renowned ticket maker type philosophy when putting together multi-race tickets. How do you do it?
I don't really have a plan before if I'm betting a pick 5. I like to look at all 5 races and then determine whether I'm going to play one big spread ticket if I think I got a lot of good decent priced horses in the whole mix. I might play one big ticket if I look at the races and I think it's going to be, I usually can tell whether I have an idea whether it's going to be a small payout or a big payout by looking at all 5, somewhat in my mind. And then if I like a single, I don't like singling a favorite. I like singling something that's, a little bit hidden, maybe something in the mid-range price that I really, really like. So it just kind of depends. I do an ABC type thing where I have levels. So if I have a single, let's say in the first leg, I may play some tickets with some C horses with some A horses. And then, using that single, I might play some, maybe I'll play A's and B's all the way out with the single. It just kind of depends on how it designs on paper. If I think it's going to be very, if I like some long shots, then I'm really going to spread. You know what I mean? I'm going to use a lot of horses in each leg to try to what the term is that Paul uses. Paul uses the term that he ties up the race. Like if he likes a long shot and he's going to play him in horizontals, he likes to tie up the other races. So use what Jazzy JH would call the ins, not the outs.
The horses, the more likely contenders are the ins.
Likely.
Right, the outs being a race that's open and an outsider has a better chance. I'm guessing that's where the ins and outs comes from.
Oh my gosh, Tom Lute is throwing up right now that ins and outs got a mention on the podcast.
James Henry, you guys make fun of him, but I don't see either of you making a serious bid to sweep the Santa Anita contests lately. He's been on fire out there, and he's got to be a player to watch at this weekend's Del Mar tournament, don't you think?
Yeah, my man Jazz. He's always a man to watch. Look out, the man in black.
The man in black, indeed.
He wore a white shirt the other night, by the way, just so everyone knows.
I don't know.
We'll
see how that affects his form going into the Del Mar tournament. We have another interesting wagering strategy question here I want to get your take on, Duke. Somebody wants to know what your preferred method is of attacking a heavy favorite that you hate.
That I hate?
That you hate. What pools are you most apt to go after the heavy favorite that you don't like in?
If I don't like a heavy favorite, I'm in all pools. I mean, I want every possible bet I can possibly have in that race if I hate a heavy favorite, because those are the opportunities you just don't get too often. When you really hate a 3 to 5, you got to be in everything. I mean, especially the exactas, the tries, because if he's ever off the board, you can make so much money. And we saw. There wasn't there recently. Oh yeah, Arrogant was. Take that for example. I mean, it was only a 5-horse field, but
yes.
for Paul and I, we both thought that his worst race he ever ran was at Del Mar. I think he beat, I think it was a 3-horse field that he was life and death to get up to win by a nose. And I was surprised that Baffert chose that race to bring that horse back in, because I just didn't think the horse, he must have wanted to do it because he wanted to test him before the Pacific Classic. But in that case, you got to be in all the horizontal pulls against him if you hate him. You know what I mean? So you got to be in the pick 3s, the pick 4s, the pick 5s, the doubles, everything against him, because you're not going to get those opportunities too often.
That's
even that day, you should have bet show.
Well, that ended up being very profitable. But let's talk about that situation. I mean, he's still, even if Del Mar isn't his best track or whatever, he's still obviously, I don't think there's any way to look at that race and not have him as a very likely winner. But you're still willing to attack him just because at 1 to 20 odds, there's value in opposing him, even if you think he's likely to win. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
In that case, yes, because I thought he was a little vulnerable on that racetrack. I mean, so in that case, yes. I mean, most of the time you're not going to, that horse is probably, I mean, he's going to win probably 9 out of 10. But in that case, I thought there was definitely a play against him. I mean, I know it wasn't the greatest field in the world, but Del Mar is a very, very different track. I don't know if it's the way it's designed or the surface itself, but Del Mar can be real tough on a horse, especially that dirt track down there.
It's very horse for coursey, that's for sure. So, all right, now let's put you in Bob Baffert's shoes. Let's say the horse, he seems fine, he seems healthy, but continues to maybe show some example of not loving the surface out there. Do you think there's a world in which we'll see him come to Saratoga and run in a race like the Woodward? Would you give that any realistic chance to happen?
I would. I mean, that's what I would do. I mean, if I had that horse, I would definitely bring him here. I wouldn't run him back there against on that surface again. I mean, I don't think he cares for it. And I think he proved that with those 2 races. I think he only ran like around 100 Beyer the last time he ran down there too. I think it was, I can't remember it was that
allowance race they rode for him to prep for the Travers, essentially.
And I thought he raced poorly that day. I mean,
that's
then he came back in the Travers and looked like $1 million.
Well, there's no doubt in that. I just wonder if their hand isn't forced a little bit because of the Breeders' Cup being at Del Mar. It just seems like it would be such an extreme move to not run in that race because of where it is. It's a tricky situation, and we'll have to see what happens. I just hope we get to see the horse run again. With all the promise he showed, it wouldn't. Well, I argued the other day that it wouldn't. If that's the last we see of him, it doesn't take away from the fact that he's one of the 2 best horses that I've ever seen. But it would be so nice to have give the story a little bit of a happy ending. Where for you does this horse rate? I mean, X the San Diego. How highly were you thinking of Arrogate?
Very highly after the Dubai race. I thought. I mean, a normal horse that ran in that Dubai race that gets left at the gate and is 5 wide at all points wouldn't finish probably. I mean, they would run last, and somehow he overcame all that in one going away. I mean, against a good horse too. He's definitely up there. I'm not sure he's I'm not sure he's yet with a Sunday Silence or a Ghost Zapper, but he's pretty darn close. He runs figures that are pretty close to those horses, but he's definitely in the top 5 that I've ever seen. That's for sure.
One other wagering question from a listener was talking about having a $15 winner at Del Mar over the weekend in a race where he did not like the top 2 choices in the race. Wants to know how he might have capitalized better. What are your general thoughts on that, Duke?
Well, $15 horse, you got to bet the win first of all. I mean, that's definitely a high enough price. I mean, I do it every day. I have $15 horses where I don't capitalize because I don't have who's second or who's third, and missed a double. I mean, it's just it's bad luck. I mean, you got to keep plugging away, and next time you have a $15 horse, you hope you hit you hope you hit the exact, and you hope you hit the double, you hope you hit the pick three. It's not going to happen every time. That's why you always got to have a win bet on a horse like that. That's substantial, because if you like a $15 horse and you don't like the top two choices, I guess you could fool around, I guess, to help him out. Maybe if he doesn't like the top two choices, he should wheel the horse in the exact in the try, maybe without the favorites. He could play, like, let's say it was the one, he could play let's say he likes the one, he doesn't like the 2, 3, go one with everybody else, in the try, first and second. He could do, he could play alls, he could play one with all with a couple horses, one with a couple horses with all, but that's not my style. When I'm right, I like to be right. So if he missed the exact, I think it was just bad luck, and he'll get him next time,
Yeah, for me in that situation, my inclination would be to have at least 50% of the bet. For me, being pretty conservative betting-wise, probably more than 50% on the win, because like you pointed out,
yeah.
15-60, nothing to sneeze at, and you're sort of getting that value already from the fact that you don't like those top two choices. That's giving you your win overlay. So I'm going to want to I'm going to be I think I'm going to be happier than you guys just taking that win money and then just taking a smaller portion of the play and trying to knock it out if everything comes exactly right. Do you think, in this theoretical example, bankroll percentage-wise, how much of your money are you inclined to shoot for the win as opposed to the exotics in this scenario?
I think you got it right. I'm going to think it's pretty much you got to be 50% win and then 50% gimmicks. But I like to tend to bet exact as the most. After win, if I bet 500 to win an horse, I'll probably bet 500 in exactas too. So I mean, I think you got it pretty much the way I would do it. It's just bad luck. He didn't connect, and if I had if I connected on every exact I missed when I had a $15 horse, I'd be a bazillionaire. It's not going to happen. I mean, you're just going to miss. You're going to miss now and then, and that's the game. That's why you got to have that win better. Yeah.
JK, what, do you have anything to add on this? I know you sometimes have some contrarian ideas about betting theory and construction.
No, I mean, I Duke makes a good point about the exacta. I mean, I think I said a couple weeks ago, the time that Duke and I split an entry really changed my game when I kept on saying, let's play the try here, and Duke was like, well, why don't we just play the exacta? And it made a ton of sense to me, and it's really made my game a lot better because I can predict what's going to happen more with the probable payouts and stuff like that. So I agree with that. The other thing is like, when you love a horse, I agree, and I don't do it enough. You got to get paid on the win end, but I also want to turn a $15 horse into a $30 horse if I can, with some other good opinions surrounding that in doubles and pick threes. I think pick fours are, you want to be involved in those, but I wouldn't really look to a pick four to add value to a $15 horse you like. There's so much randomness in pick fours, but I think you can do that in doubles and pick threes.
Duke, let me ask you a specific question about the try. When do you like to include that in your wagers? Does it have to do with beating weak horses out of the number? Does it have to do with horses you think have a better chance to run second or third than first? What role does it play in your overall portfolio of bets?
As long as I have a key horse in the race, I'll almost always bet some sort of trifecta. As long as that horse is not, very short odds. I don't like keying horses in tries that are favored necessarily. I like playing tries when I like that type of horse, a mid-ranged horse, and I put them first, second, and third with like 3 or 4 others. So I would play like 1 with 2, 3, 4, 5, and come back with 2, 3, 4, 5 with 1 second, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 with 2, 3, 4, 5 with 1 third. I like playing, at least mid-priced horses in all 3 slots in the try. When that's what I like to do. It's just you can get great value in a trifecta, with mid, at least mid, even when they're longer, it's even better. I mean, but anything 4 to 1 or higher, I think you can get away with playing first 3 slots.
Moving your key through as opposed to trying to split too many hairs about, okay, this one can run third, but he can't run second.
Yeah, that's a tough thing to determine. I mean, you can try to do that, but I don't bet anything for just one time either. I mean, you always have to. I was trying to teach. I hate going back. I keep referencing Jazzy J. So I'm trying to teach him one day about about betting. Don't bet just one 50-cent bet. You can always press certain numbers. You know what I mean? You can't rely on the payoff always being big, right? So, I mean, the favorites are going to beat you at times. So, and if you don't mind them, if you think they have a very good chance of beating you, you can press those numbers. Like let's say in the case you like the 1 and he's a decent price, but the favorite is solid in that race, and you can put him on top and put your horse second and third, behind him, and bet it for a few more dollars, just so when you're just slightly wrong or you're actually most of the time you're most of the way right, but the best horse beats you, you still should cash. You still should cash good. And I think those are the things that the everyday person just don't do. I think they don't realize that, hey, if my horse gets a bad ride and he runs second, I still should cash. I still should make some money somehow.
All right, that's great stuff. Let's move on. We've got just about 20 minutes left in the show. We've got a bunch of races to chat about. Let's start not at Saratoga, and then we'll loop back. I haven't had a ton of time to dig in thoroughly to the Haskell yet, but I did get a chance to look over the field. I'm guessing it's about the same for you guys. Duke, what are you don't even have to feel the pressure to give a pick this early for a race that's going on Sunday, but what are your general thoughts on this Haskell field, and does anything jump off the page in terms of a wager you're likely to make?
It's a really good field. I'm going to try and bring the race up now on my computer here, but I bet Irish War Cry in the Belmont, and I thought it was I thought it was the wrong idea for him to go to the lead that day. I thought the horse was just going to stalk outside because I had that track being a little bit outside that day. So I think he's a very good horse, but this field, trying to bring up all the horses in here, but this field is solid. I mean, you talk about every horse that has been in the 3-year-old picture this year that's been decent is in there. It's like
between that and the Jim Dandy, it's for folks who only follow racing for the Triple Crown are going to have an awful lot of stuff to pay attention to. And we nearly had all 3 Triple Crown race winners coming to the Jim Dandy, of course, with Tappert deciding to skip the race and train up to the Travers. Something it's so hard to imagine when you think, Duke, about, when we were learning the game, the idea that it would make any sense at all to just train right up to a 10-furlong race. Of course, the stuff we've seen Todd Pletcher do over the years probably sounds like about the right idea, but a little disappointed not to get to see all 3 Triple Crown race winners at Saratoga. But as much attention and we'll talk about the Dandy later, the Haskell certainly seems like the race, the bigger of the 2 marquee events for 3-year-olds happening this weekend. You got a chance to get it pulled up there?
Yeah, I got all the horses here now. I mean, you look at the field, there's not one horse you would say, can't win. I mean, you got Battle Midway, the horse from California that got involved in the pace in the Derby. You got Timeline, the Chad Brown horse that's lightly raced that I don't think he might not have ever lost. And then Practical Joke, I think, is better at 1 turn than 2 turns. And McCracken, I mean, wasn't he the favorite in the Derby? I think he was one of.
He was right there with Irish War Cry, wasn't he?
Yeah, and then you got Henson Gervin too. And Gervin seemed like he improved, last time. I think he won the Iowa. Did he win the race in Iowa, or did he won the race in Ohio?
He beat Gervin in the Ohio, right, and then went on. We watched that race here in the basement, JK. Which minor Derby was that?
Gervin won Ohio, and IRAP won Iowa.
Okay.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. But, so I mean, all the horses are solid. They're just, there's a lot of speed in the race, and with Irish War Cry, Battle Midway, and Timeline. So I mean, there should be pace, and it's going to be rare. It's going to be a really good race.
My gut was that maybe McCracken, of all the horses, McCracken seemed the one that they might be the happiest with a hard charging 4th, sort of set him up for a run in the Travers, the sort of old school training methods of Ian Wilkes. I mean, you never know that sometimes they could be happy with that, and if the pace is fast enough, the horse can win anyway. But my inclination for the top spots was to maybe be a little bit against him, thinking they'd be happy not to win. And then I agree with your assessment, as I think a lot of us do, about Practical Joke. Can't blame him for trying, I guess, the 2 turns again, but I think we saw last time what he really wants to do. JK, do you have any strong opinions in this race?
No, not really. I mean, there's horses I want to lean on. I kind of wanted to get interested in Timeline, but I thought he kind of was where he wanted, he's in the good part of the track last time. And then Practical Joke, I think, is a is a one-turn horse, which obviously a one-turn horse can beat me in this race, as Exaggerator did last year.
Proved that last year, yes.
McCracken is, I think they were thinking that maybe shorter was better for him, but then he shows up here. But then is this a prep for a trainer who likes to kind of ease his horses into things? And I just kind of end up landing on like Irish Warcry, who's going to be drawn inside, who's going to be forwardly placed on a track that typically favors inside speed. And it's not overly creative, but I know that this was the original target before they kind of audibled and went to the Belmont anyway. So, look, and ironically enough, I don't know if you guys knew this, but this race is actually open to bet in the Del Mar Betting Challenge. They're doing two simulcast races each day from somewhere across the world, and there's 2 on Saratoga on Saturday, and then this is one of the races on Sunday. So, it's definitely going to be interesting. I guess maybe I'll give McCracken a little bit of a chance, but it feels like Irish Warcry is probably the most likely winner to draw down the inside.
You make a great point about McCracken and the potential distance limitations. I did read something about that from Wilkes, so maybe I'm dead wrong. Maybe this is where they think he can get the job done. Any further thoughts, Duke, on the Haskell before we move it out west to the Bing Crosby?
No, I agree with JK. I like Irish Warcry. I think the inside draw is going to be really good for him. He can sit or go, and I think he's got, Monmouth is a track where usually favors inside speed. So I mean, I think he's got the best chance. He might be the favorite though.
I think so. There's been a lot of narrative about him, the owner's connection to the race, and Graham mentioning it right away after the Derby. There's a lot of narrative there. The money could come pouring in, but certainly one that I will be, whatever I do in the race, that there'll be plenty of Irish Warcry on the tickets. Let's move out to the Bing Crosby, the return to the races of Drefong. Several other really interesting horses in here, though. JK, I'll ask it this way: is this a race you're targeting for use in the Del Mar handicapping challenge, and how were you thinking of playing it?
Yeah, I think I will, because I'm sort of in love with the second choice in this race. Obviously, Drefong will go off favored. I don't care what anyone says. I find it a little bit curious that he hasn't been back to the track until now. I don't care how conservative they're trying to be with him. But for me, I think Ransom the Moon is something else, and I think that the 7 was actually a little bit further than he probably wanted to go last time. I think it kind of dulls his late kick. Closing in a slow pace is going 6.5. He was winning for fun at Santa Anita. And this big field, I think he'll get some pace to close into, and he'll get that kind of outside closing trip that can sometimes do so well at Del Mar, depending on where the tide is. I'm kidding. I have no idea about the tide.
There are rumors about that, though.
But, no, I like Ransom the Moon. And before any of you wise guys pick Big Mocker, I heard he's going to be scratched.
My question for you, JK, is you think he'll be the second choice over Roy H. and the big speed figure coming out of the True North? I was thinking the crowd might go that way.
Yeah, I mean, but how many horses does Pete have in here? Like 4? I mean, I think that, that Peter Miller money kind of gets spread out. He's got, 3 horses? I think it'll get spread out a little bit.
Solid Wager and St. Joe Bay.
Yeah.
No, that's a fair point, trying to read what the market's going to do. Duke, how do you see it?
I like Ransom the Moon too. I think the 7 was too long for him. I love the cutback. Drefong, I mean, Baffert can win with these types of horses, but he's going to be overbet. He's going to be less than 2-1, and I think I don't want him at that short of price. And Roy H. did run a hell of a race last time. He was impressive, but Peter Miller was going really good back then, and he has struggled a little bit so far at Del Mar. I think he's like 4 for 30 or somewhere along those lines. And at Santa Anita and all those horses he shipped east all ran big. So I'm kind of a little bit against that. Plus, I think that was a muddy track, if I remember right. He's not going to see any mud in at Del Mar. I'm sticking with Ransom the Moon. I think he's going to get a good trip in and out, inside out, and there should be plenty of pace, like JK said.
All right, gentlemen, we've got 15 minutes to talk about the late pick 4 at Saratoga on Saturday. The first race is the Vanderbilt, Grade 1, 6 furlongs. Duke, we'll start with you on this one. You have any strong opinion here? We got some big names showing up for this dance.
What race are we starting with?
That's race 8 at Saratoga, the Vanderbilt. We've got AP Indian making his return to the races on a track he really likes. Limousine Liberal coming back after he's got this little winning streak going, but he's yet to do it in a Grade 1. Those are the two storylines I'm sort of interested in, are to see if AP Indian is really cycling back up into that best form he showed in the middle of last year, and see if Limousine Liberal can, speed figure wise, he's wanting a bit, but just on form and the margins of his victories are so impressive. He certainly looks like an extremely legitimate contender to get it done at the Grade 1 level.
Yeah, Limousine Liberal's been. I don't know why they've been scared to take on the big guys with that horse. That horse just seems like he's just amazing. Just does nothing but win. I thought he won against the track at Churchill 2 back, I think it was. I think he sat like in the 5 path the whole race and just ran by him. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe he could do such a thing. He does draw outside post, which I'm not sure is the greatest thing, but I guess he can stalk. AP Indian, runs he comes and runs every time he runs his race. He's a solid 6 furlong, type horse, and it's hard to leave him out. So, I think those two are the main contenders, but I think as long as the track's playing fair, I think I'd lean on Limousine Liberal. I think he's been very impressive in all his wins this year.
Navarro shows up with El Deal, potentially going to try to wire them, I would imagine, with drawn inside of Green Grotto. What do Navarro's one of these guys. He's had success in some places. He's had some success in New York, but not necessarily the same level of success. What do you do with his horses when they tend to show up in a big spot like this, Duke?
This one I'm against. This last time he raced at Monmouth, he was on a big inside speed favoring track, and I think with Green Grotto in there, nobody usually gets too far ahead of Green Grotto, so I think he's in trouble. And that Navarro thing, he hasn't had the years this year. He hasn't had the year that he has had in the past few. So I think he's kind of cooled off a little bit, especially in New York. A lot of the horses he's run in New York haven't run too well this year. So I don't give him too much chance in this race.
One more question for you before we move on to JK's thoughts on the Vanderbilt. The Limousine Liberal, pretty light on the buyers. On Paul's speed figures, do they elevate a little bit, or does he have it sort of the same mid-90s situation?
Our figures tend to be a little bit higher than the buyers in general. I don't know why that is, because they use the same scale, but Limousine Liberal is like a 104, like almost solid. His last 4 races he's been between 102 and 105, and AP Indian is a little bit faster than that. He's like 107 this year for both of his starts. So AP Indian has a little bit better figures. I think it's just the way Limousine Liberal has won has impressed me, especially that race 2 back. I thought the track was playing totally inside speed in it. So 103, what I would call against the track, that could easily equate to 107.
JK, how do you see it?
Yeah, I'm a big AP Indian fan. Obviously, he hasn't had the same kind of punch that he had when he left Keeneland last year. But I don't blame him for that. He's had some kind of weird circumstances. Look, I know they were pointing birdsong for the Whitney, obviously, with the ownership being Mary Lou Whitney. I know that's one of their goals all year long, and rode a golden rail to win it 2 turns. I think might have tricked them a little bit on Oaks Day. in the mud where he got down to the inside and kept on going. And then I'm very thankful that he ran poorly in the Foster, going 2 turns, because I thought this horse has always wanted to go 1 turn. I mean, I guess I'm not crazy about it being at 6, but I think he'll get enough pace to run at with Green Grotto and AP Indian. Julian obviously will find himself back there, whether you want him to be back there or not. And I think he'll come running late. And it's going to be a desperate finish, but he will flash at the top of the stretch. And whether he has enough to get home, we'll have to see. But I'll definitely try to figure it out at 6-1.
Maybe back that one up underneath a little bit, given the concerns. But interesting way to go. And the horse probably doing something he really wants to do. All right, let's move on to the Bowling Green. JK will keep it with you. What do you like in here?
We talk about it all the time. I'm a sucker for closing into slow paces, and Sadler's Joy had no shot trying to catch a send last time at Belmont, and going a little bit longer. I would expect Sadler's Joy to do really well. Obviously, we joke about it all the time. You could leave Maker off of a long turf race if you want to, but I don't see how Bigger Picture and or Sadler's Joy don't get the job done.
Duke, how do you see it?
The big problem with this race is there's no speed. Again, I mean, Sadler's Joy, I believe, is the best horse in this race. I agree with everything JK said about him. That horse has had slow paces like every single time he runs and comes to Lion. I think that horse, unfortunately, is not going to get another. He's going to get another slow pace, and I don't know if I trust these guys at Saratoga. They go real slow when they go slow. So I mean, I would look for somebody to steal this race. It might be a horse like Frank Conversation. He's probably got the most speed in here. Probably go to the front. He might be able to just get a real easy lead, and it might be over. I mean, where these guys ride around here, you can't trust these guys ever to go forward. So I would probably lean on Frank Conversation just and hope that he gets an easy lead. Interesting
idea there. Yeah, you could. Hello, Don Julio. I was thinking was going to make the lead, but John Velasquez loves that sort of too wide stalking trip on the turf, and you could see Mario being drawn inside, having no choice but to go. Some definitely interesting ideas there. Let's move on to the Jim Dandy. We've talked about it a little bit tricky from a wagering point of view with 5 horses. My one idea in here, I don't know if it's clever or not, but is to just play the race where good. This is one where I'll do that thing I was saying before, Duke, about splitting some hairs and just saying a horse can be third. I kind of like that for Good Samaritan, just to finish and pass a couple of these and get up into third with one of the obvious ones winning. That was my idea from a wagering point of view. How about you? Who do you like to win this race, and do you have any thought about how to bet it?
Good Samaritan is a great turf horse, and it's just a matter. I mean, I don't know about the dirt. He's never been on it. I've seen Mott do this before, though. I think Cigar raced on turf his whole life, and then he finally put him on dirt later in his career, and look what he did. So it wouldn't surprise me if that horse liked the dirt. I mean, now you got Redham's horse here coming from California. He's run 1 time, and he's probably going to be the speed of the race. So I think that's got to hurt. It's got to hurt Always Dreaming a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I don't really have a strong opinion in this 5-horse race, but I mean, it's probably going to be Cloud Computing is my guess. Probably win it, even though
looks like
I think he'll be way. I think he'll be way over bet too. He'll probably be lower than Always Dreaming. I would think.
What would you do if you were playing multis? How would you think to play this? Just accept the lower number on Cloud Computing and move on, or try to lock it up with using both him and Always Dreaming? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I'm kind of against Always Dreaming. I thought that he liked the mud that day when he won at Churchill, and he didn't come back and do anything the next time out. I'm just going to go against him totally. So I'll probably just use Cloud Computing as my A horse in multis, and then maybe throwing a couple of throwing those other horses just on backup tickets.
Makes sense. Yeah, Giuseppe the Great has a little bit of an interesting look to throw in there. For a penny, I think. This is a horse who might appreciate going longer than ever before. I wouldn't mind throwing in for a little piece on the backup multi-tickets if you wanted to get a little clever here. JK, what about you? How do you see the Dandy?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's one of those races that as soon as it's over, go to Duke's Twitter, and he's going to be talking about how annoying it is that these guys don't ride horses forwardly. It's almost guaranteed. So does
this mean you're picking Pavel?
Yeah, I mean, that would be my top pick just because I feel like, Johnny's going to take back with Always Dreaming. He's not going to send him from the inside in a prep race with the Derby winner. Cloud Computing and Javier, they're going to take back. And Mario's got one way of going, and I don't mean that as a compliment. So it's like, in my opinion, if you're playing this pick 4 and you're not singling one of these horses, you shouldn't be playing the pick 4. It's just, if you use 3 horses in this race, you got a big problem.
Hard to grind any equity out of this. And remember, last year JK did call the whatever he was 28 to 1 winner Laubon in this race. So you have a history of picking long shots successfully to put the field to sleep in the Jim Dandy. So let's see if you can be right again, guys. We just have a couple minutes left. I do want to get some quick thoughts on this Nightcap at Saratoga. I was thinking it was fairly. Should bite my tongue when I say this, but fairly straightforward to close out the pick 4 with 2 Chad Brown runners, Durable Goods, the 2, Wake Island, the 3, and was a little interested to see Magical Sky, who I thought showed some really nice closing kick, hopefully getting a chance to have maybe a fairer shot. I was just going to use those 3 and move on from here, hoping maybe one of you guys has something a little bit more clever to close out the sequence. JK, we'll start with you. Oh, are you still there?
Yeah. No, sorry, I was muted. It was a muting disaster. Yeah, I was kind of the same way. I just felt like Durable Goods, Klarovich, they try to win the meet all the time, and so when he shows up with horses for Chad, they always outrun their what I think they're going to do, and so he's definitely one I would use. If you're not using both Chads, then God bless you on the turf at Saratoga. But I was a little bit interested in Fashion Week, first time turf, but nothing to ride home about. I've decided I will not be playing this pick 4 sequence. It's just not. It's one of those that you feel like you kind of have to because it's Jim Dandy Day, but the truth of the matter is you really don't have to.
Duke, how about you? Anything catch your eye in the Nightcap at Saratoga on Saturday?
Yeah, there's a couple of horses that I think could surprise here, and they're both trained by Bill Mott, actually. The horse Length. We got an interesting workout comment. The horse worked with Closing Bell, and actually John the Clocker, we call him. He does the workouts for us in the morning. And this horse is by Warfront, and he's got some family that could run a little bit. There was a horse called Size that was by First Samurai that this is a have to. And
sure.
And this horse is by Warfront, who's a much better turf sire than First Samurai. So I think the fact that horse worked with Closing Bell and actually beat it, and has better breeding than some of the others that have already run from that family. I think this horse is very interesting. Probably should be used in a pick 4 for sure because he's 12 to 1 on the morning line.
What about Freedom, the other Mott runner you mentioned, Duke? What do you like there?
Yeah, so Freedom ran as a 2-year-old at at Keeneland, and I tend to like. I think one thing that this horse is also by Warfront, by the way. I tend to like horses that run at 2, on turf, and then come back, later on, come back as a 3-year-old, because people get lost with the 2-year-old figures. Because 2-year-old figures are always a little bit, what we call it is 2-year-old improvement, 2 to 3.
Sure.
So especially with fillies, like a filly like this, it's 2 in September and October. We have a run of 69 on the turf last time. I would expect that you would see at least a 10-point increase there from 2 to 3, maybe even more like 15. So projecting, that, and this horse has also been working good. There's a good workout comment on that horse. I would think she's got a chance too. She's got speed too.
I like it. Good stuff, and stuff that's not just going to help listeners in this race, but that's an idea to look for, that improvement as horses develop, especially when they're in the right hands, to expect that kind of improvement. Somebody like Bill Mott certainly fits that bill. that is all the time we have for this edition of the DRF Players Podcast. Duke, I want to thank you immensely for joining us and wish you again a happy birthday.
Oh, thanks.
And of course,
good luck to JK out at good luck to JK in the Del Mar tournament.
Definitely, that was going to be my closing thought. Thank JK for his help as always, and wish him Godspeed out at Del Mar. See if he can get the job down out there and cool off the white hot Jazzy JH and all the other tournament players expected to show up at Del Mar. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for listening. We'll be back on Tuesday. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatow. May you win all your photos.